Hello everyone, I'm Chloe Johnson and welcome to this Fresh Business Thinking webinar series, Lockdown Learning for Businesses, supported by BT. Fresh Business Thinking is proud to be a part of Skills for Tomorrow by BT, which is helping 10 million people in the UK make the most of life in the digital world. Working with us and other leading digital skills enterprise and community organisations, BT has created and collated some of the best advice, information and support in one easy place to navigate. It's easy for anyone to access our webinars as well as discover other ways they or their family and friends can grow their confidence and skills to make the most of tech. All it takes to get started is to head to www.bt.com/skills for tomorrow or by clicking on the link in the comments section. Coronavirus has been a real challenge for small businesses and entrepreneurs across the UK. At Fresh Business Thinking, we're used to putting on events, sharing expertise and encouraging and supporting networking. Throughout the pandemic, we knew this simply couldn't just stop. Perhaps more than ever, this is a time when as a business community, we need to come together and support one another. And we're lucky enough to work with organisations and individuals who are passionate about supporting entrepreneurs during this difficult time. One of those is our speakers today from Smith & Williamson, Adrian Hextall and Mo Salim. Adrian leads Smith & Williamson's tax technology team and has worked in this field for over 25 years, advising clients on technology solutions. Mo advises clients in relation to their tax technology needs, including the deployment of process automation, robotics, and the utilization of data analytics. Today, Adrian and Mo will discuss how technology and automation can change the way we work and boost business. Adrian and Mo will be talking for around 40 minutes and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, you can leave them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and we'll do our best to get to them later on in the session. That's all from me for now, and I'll pass over to you, Adrian and Mo.
Thank you, Chloe. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mo Salim. I'm an Associate Director in the Tax Technology and Transformation team at S&W, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Adrian Hextall. Is the world about to change again? I thought it was a good idea to start with a few quotes I read in the news recently. Chloe touched upon the impact of COVID on the business world, and that has forced the hand of almost all organizations to change in some way or form. I think the most interesting one was from Financial Executive International. In my opinion, it really sums up the business case for adopting and using technology. Downturns like the one created by COVID are an opportunity to streamline and strengthen business functions using automation technologies that offer quantifiable cost savings and increases in productivity. This resonates a lot with our clients. We are seeing take up technology transformation projects or make the use of technology a headline agenda in their strategy. The key driver for them being cost reduction and boosting productivity. And I'll talk about these later in the presentation, but there are immediate challenges we are facing from remote working, and how do we overcome these? I'll hand over to Adrian to take you through this first topic.
Thank you very much, Mo. If we can move on to the next slide, please. I wanted to start this afternoon's session with what I certainly experienced when I first started working remotely. We're going back now to the middle of March, and I've had to work from home ever since, and we're only just starting to talk about a return to the office in a staggered and safe format so that everybody can essentially return to work and feel comfortable about it while maintaining social distancing and other safety protocols that need to be adhered to. But at the time we initially moved to a remote working status, everything was up in the air. What could we do? What couldn't we do? What could be achieved? What couldn't? Our firm, as well as many others, experienced a huge surge in requirements from individual users working remotely. And as you might imagine, we, along with other organizations, typically had a capacity to handle perhaps 30 to 40% of people at any one time working outside of the office environment, dialing in through VPNs, accessing all of the systems that they needed to on a day-to-day basis to complete whatever tasks needed to be done or perform their own particular services, or it could just be to keep on top of what they needed to do from an administrative perspective. But what you see on here is the typical thing that has happened to a lot of people. There's been a need for running of compliance tools, perform financial reporting. The procurement departments had to be able to get information about particular vendors and put that information on the system as well. Not surprisingly, as people work more and more remotely, the volume of email traffic goes up, as do the demands on system access and other things. The key elements that we've wanted to deal with, for me personally, handling my timesheet to work out who I've been dealing with on a weekly basis, the web conferences like the ones that we're doing now, very, very resource hungry as far as broadband width and things like that are concerned. And of course, then outside of that, what does get through the email quiz, the email traffic, and of course the department quiz, two of the key things that people have suddenly discovered they could do through Zoom sessions like the ones that we're having today as well. So it's not all been bad. Some things have come about and some things have worked very well, but the capacity to be able to deal with all of this has meant a lot of internal work behind the scenes, embracing of better technologies to allow better connectivity to the office environment, better connectivity to the firm's infrastructure, and also better ways of connecting with our colleagues as well. A lot of us, being office-based, are used to being able to have throwaway conversations just by turning around to speak to somebody else. You can't exactly do that when you're working remotely. You've got to find a gap. You've got to find the opportunity to call somebody up if they're available and speak to them. And where we've hit those problems and where we've hit barriers just because of connectivity problems with our own home broadband services, whether it's on a mobile phone service or whether it's a direct to the house connection, there's been things that have created additional challenges and slowed down what we can do. But if we can move on to the next one, Mo, what we find is that we have an opportunity outside of the norm. Our normal day, typically, if we're working in an office, let's say the typical working day takes place somewhere between 8 a.m. and say 8 p.m. in the evening. And there are a certain number of hours that you would work every day during that 12-hour window. Outside of that time, the impact on the systems is very low. The requirements of the infrastructure are minimal. The need for the system to be able to perform above peak capacity, it's no longer there. So we have half a day, every single working day of the week, where things could take place if we had the access to the systems that we wanted. This broadly boils down to, I worked it out to be the best time I could do all of my work and get it done at the most efficient point of the day is something in the region of around 2 a.m. None of the systems are overburdened. Any report I wanted to run could be run comfortably and get the results straight to me. I can post things, I can pull things down, I can run any of the compliance tools that I want to, because there's no longer a bottleneck there. Everything can flow through as it needs to. System access becomes available, but the only downside, do I really want to set my alarm for 1:45 a.m. to be getting up at 2 to do all of this, to complete the work I wanted to do and couldn't do earlier in the day, and then go back to sleep again? Simple answer is no, and it's coming about as a result, and the quote you see there at the bottom from Toby Lutker at Shopify, we are really looking at a tide of change here. We're looking at ways of working out how we can perform better and more efficiently with all of these new challenges that are being thrown at us. And if we can find ways of improving our productivity, our capabilities, and our efficiencies by allowing these lost hours currently to be better utilized, can I find something to help me work at 2 a.m. in the morning? Well, the answer is actually yes, we can. And that's what we're hoping to cover with you in this particular session as well. Next one, please, Mo. If you look at what we're trying to do, it's not just a case of can I make myself personally more efficient working remotely? It's about what we can do within an organization as well. Utilizing some of the things that we've seen making life more acceptable and beneficial to the way you work when you're working remotely. Perhaps if we can apply that to wider system requirements, wider processes that take place, we can look at how we can boost productivity through process improvements, process changes, and ultimately process automation as well. Taking the responsibility away from the individual who's now finding it difficult to access the systems when they want to during normal work hours, and allow automated processes and the use of robotics to handle some of those things out of hours so that the end result is ready for those individuals when they come back to work the following morning. By doing that, taking away some of the repetitive, mundane components that impact people at the moment, we're able to help staff focus on value-added elements to those processes, greater levels of governance and review time over certain controls that need to be done, especially where we're talking about compliance reporting as well, and the numbers that need to be traceable from start through to finish before they get reported, for example, to the tax authorities. If we can do that, we can improve a process, we can make it more efficient and, more importantly, more accurate. If we can help staff drop the things that take the time that they don't really want to do to allow them to focus on not only the more interesting things, but also the things that matter more and add more value to the business, it's going to reduce costs, it's going to make you more accurate, and it gives you a greater sense of control and comfort over the numbers that are being reported. If anybody on the call has ever had any responsibility around senior accounting officer, the SAO process, for example, you're signing off on processes and controls that you hope are being adhered to. With something like process automation and robotics, you've got the comfort that it is being adhered to, because a process run by a robot, effectively it's like it's on rails. It can't deviate, it won't stray from the path, it's going to do exactly what you ask it to do, and when it's done, you can sign off at the end to say that you're comfortable that it's there. Next slide, please, Mo. On the end of that, to go into a little bit more depth about what is possible in that particular space, I'm going to hand back over to Mo now, and he'll be able to give you a little bit more of a drill down and an insight into how process and automation can benefit not only you as individuals working remotely, but also businesses as well.
Thanks, Adrian. With process automation and technology, a lot of buzzwords are being thrown around, but what exactly is robotic process automation? So starting with what is a robot and what are robotic processes, well, essentially robots are computer-coded software designed to mimic human interaction with software. They basically replicate mouse clicks and keystrokes as humans would do in the day-to-day. Robots perform robotic processes, which in the bare bones involves transferring, manipulating, and matching data. But this gets stressed in many ways, i.e. automating data, entry reconciliations, and or validations. Moving to the next slide, we'll bring this to life a bit more. The visual on the slide you see there is generally what all processes consist of. There's a number of inputs that are processed to create a number of outputs. If we look at this visual for an example like invoicing, then it'll bring to life the various steps. If you imagine your inputs are your PDFs of invoices that you receive in your mailbox, your central systems would be your invoicing processing software or your accounting software. And for regulatory requirements, we can use VAT for this example. So typically a human or an AP clerk would pick up the invoices from the mailbox, put them side by side on the screen to, on one side you have the invoice, the other side you have your accounting software, and begin to key in the information that's already there on the PDF into their system. They may do some checks, they may do some approvals along the way, but once they've keyed all of this in, they'll run a series of reports. Those are ledger reports, payment runs, and forward these on to their manager for approval. If we consider it from a robotic perspective, then the robot is able to pick up the invoices from the emails. It then validates the invoices, performing 100% checks and balances. So this is your value add, a bit around what Adrian was talking around, giving you extra control and governance. You can have business checks, which are checks that the supplier exists in your software, the details are correct, the invoice amounts, products or services received or are as the PO that was raised. The regulatory checks come in with checking VAT numbers, VAT codes, or VATable amounts. Once all these checks have been passed, it is then keyed into the central system. The robot is then able to run off all the reports, payment runs, and send progress emails along the way. The process then you find is able to run entirely without human intervention. But what does this actually mean? So if we consider the typical day of a finance team, before the robot, the typical day would involve the AP clerk would start the day with their to-dos or priorities list, and then have a catch up with the manager. Then they'll maybe have a coffee break and start with the actual posting, the real value of the real work that they do. So they'll be keying in the invoices or the ledgers, for example. Come 1 p.m., it's generally time for lunch. And then after lunch, they'll continue with their postings. Around 4 o'clock is a good time to have an afternoon cuppa, and they'll probably break for that. But once they're back, finally they pass on any exceptions to the managers, which may be looked at by the manager late in the day or even possibly tomorrow. But how we change that is by optimizing processes. With the addition of a robot, we actually utilize all the available hours in the day. Because again, what Adrian was talking about, can I do my work at 2 a.m.? The robot can certainly do your work at 2 a.m. And we have the robot run the postings at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. where traffic systems would be minimal. The robot is able to process a day's or even a week's worth of invoicing postings in the morning. Then the robot runs the reports and reconciliations and passes this on to the AP clerk well before 9 a.m. How this changes the day for the AP clerk? Well, when they arrive at their desk, they actually already know what the exceptions are. All the immediate priorities are already sitting in their mailbox. The robots run the reports, done the reconciliations, and provided any high-level, the exceptions that need to be actioned on the same day. All the processes and robots are run, and you're able to close the ledgers faster. This would mean that your month-end close happens faster, and the biggest benefit you'll have is in a real-time view of your payables and ledgers. Another benefit, I mean, just speaking about benefits of using robotic processes, we can move on to what are some of the benefits that you're looking at with robotic processes. Well, generally, you're looking at reducing process costs by 80%. This is largely from the time saving of human time. You can choose to reduce your team size or utilize their time on value add or special projects, which you may not be able to do before due to the lack of available time. Handling times are reduced by 40%. As the data is more readily available. By having a 24/7 workforce, you're able to process data more quickly and have an accurate real-time reflection of your business. Improving quality, in my opinion, is one of the most understated benefits of RPA. Not only are you realizing an elimination of human error, the process we build involve 100% checks and balances, giving you greater assurance and control over the processes. This ties in with what Adrian was saying around new legislation like the Senior Accounting Officer regimes or CCO, or other certifications required by boards to governmental authorities to certify that their control measures are in place and processes are fit and proper. Finally, S&W, why us? We have rapid delivery capability, means we usually are able to get processes up and running within 8 weeks in a phased approach. How we deliver this is in the form of a managed service. We first conduct a feasibility study to understand the current as-is process. We then make the process more lean, generally by kicking the tires, questioning why certain steps are being taken, and you'd be amazed about the responses we sometimes get. One of my favorite ones was a client reconciling their reconciliation spreadsheets, or we've always done this way, so it's been this way since the 1920s. So, you know, just by having that layer of a feasibility study and looking at the process, we're able to make it more lean and get it ready for automation. The resulting point of the feasibility study is generally a business case as to why you should automate. It's a cost versus benefit analysis of if you did automate, it'll cost X amounts, but the benefits, immediate benefits, and larger, say 3-year benefits are X, Y, Z. We deliver the project as a managed service. We do the development, the configuration, and the go live. And it's our S&W robots that conduct the process, meaning we do not have to invest in expensive software or infrastructure robot specialists. I just want to bring to life some of the possible case studies we have or scenarios where robotic can work with. And yeah.
Just before we do that one, can we just jump back to the calendar slide for a moment?
Sure.
Because I think one of the things that's worth mentioning on this as well is around that. I mean, I love the optimized day, but because it looks like we're done by midday, doesn't it? You know, we've got nothing left to do for the day. We can all knock off. It's a long lunch, and away we go from there. The point around this is very much optimize the day to allow you, as you've mentioned on the next slide as well, to be able to do the things that matter as opposed to the things that take time. And that's the big difference here, isn't it?
It is, exactly. So as you can see in your optimized day, as you said, around 5 or 6 hours are being saved. So all that extra time means you can do extra checking. There's other procedures or projects you can run. And it's about gaining time back. So you're not, your staff not sitting there doing low value, keying in information, mundane work.
A lot of people we've spoken to. I mean, Mo made comment around some great responses that we've had from clients of ours, where they've looked at the reason they're doing something in a particular process. And it's very often the fact that it's because we've always done it that way. That is possibly the most common response we get. But there is also the, well, what does that mean for me? If we're automating everything, where does that leave me? It takes you back to why you think you joined the firm in the first place. You thought you were going to be doing the interesting stuff. You thought you were going to be doing more, say, investigative work, more advisory type work. You'd be looking at the best way to do something within the organization that you work for that allows you to present a more efficient and more optimized team and department potentially. And if we take away the things that have almost caused, and this is what we find with a lot of clients, they fall into the reporting rut, for want of a better description, where it takes 45 days to do a 30-day process. And so by the time you've not quite finished the current one, you're already starting the process to repeat the exercise for the next month's reporting cycle. And it becomes a never-ending routine. As quickly as you manage to produce everything you need to do for month or quarter end reporting, you're at the point where you're having to repeat the exercise all over again. You're working long hours, you're not getting a chance to breathe. It becomes very oppressive. It becomes very difficult to stay on top of everything, when in fact what's causing the problem is the time it takes to do a lot of this repetitive work, and that's what this looks to free up for you. One of the questions that's come in talks about particular softwares that are available to enable all of this. And Margaret, where you've raised that question, yes, we'll come to that at the end, but the answer is yes, there are multiple solutions out there in the market that can allow you to do some or all of this, and we'll touch upon a few of those by the time we finish this particular session. But just wanted to reiterate that. But Mo, back to you if you want to look at some of your case studies.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. And just to set the scene for the case study, so this is a mid to large business that wanted to utilize robotics in their accounts receivable process. We conducted a process review, the feasibility study, and the key findings were a team of 30 would typically spend an average of 21 minutes mouse clicking to generate an invoice from their system. And they spent a long time extracting data, reconciling it, and then feeding it back into the system. Once we optimized the process, we found by implementing RPA, the business would save around 2,100 hours monthly. This equates to around 420 days of human time saved. But I've broken down the benefits on the next slide of what was achieved. So the reduced costs, again, you have the 420 days of employee time, which was saved, but also the business was able to realize over £500,000 in working capital benefit. This is on the back of boosted productivity, specifically because the invoices were all generated by the robots. So we're being created faster, generally overnight, and we're in the mailboxes for the relationship managers to send out on day 2 rather than day 15. This resulted in the invoices getting paid faster, and thus you have the working capital benefits. The staff, having saved around 420 days of time, were able to build stronger relationships and spend more time with their customers handling queries, resulting in a happier customer base. Additionally, they were on top of their credit control. Again, my favorite benefit is around improved quality. The accuracy of the invoices going out was improved and reduced human errors, meaning customers were not complaining about incorrect invoices. And additionally, the entire process has been de-risked and it does not rely on specific individuals to conduct the process. So that's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of RPA, but I'd like to hand over to Adrian, who's going to tie this all together and how you can benefit from real-time processing and the data available.
Thank you very much. A couple of things that we're going to look at on here really follow through the process that we would undertake if we were looking at how we would change processes. And this is the sort of approach that we take internally as well. There are always core processes that you need to follow for reporting purposes that take place on a relatively regular basis. And those process reviews will help us identify any particular issues within that process. It could be around accuracy, it could be around the number of people that are available to actually perform a task in a process as well. And with that, We also identify key person dependencies as well to indicate, well, what happens if something happens to them? What's going to cause the problem that will trigger a break in the process? Now, never has there been a more worthy point in time to consider that, because at the moment, none of us know what's around the corner. We don't know if we're going to be ill. We don't know if we've actually got something at the moment. We're heavily reliant on information from various government sources to tell us when it's safe to travel, when it isn't, when it's okay to go back to the office, what the requirements are around distancing, and also medical processes as well. So there's a lot to factor in. And if the key person in one of your processes becomes ill as a result of all of this, they're going to be off for at least 2 weeks. It could be a lot longer. It could be far more serious if they take a long time to recover. And if they are the ones with the knowledge of the process, what do you do in those particular cases? So process reviews that can be undertaken help us identify these issues that could arise if something was to go wrong. As you come out of those process reviews and look more at the types of robotic processes available, you then would look to pinpoint at which point in a process some form of automation may be needed. The example that Mo's spoken about around the generation of the invoices, 30 people, 21 minutes per invoice, 6,000 invoices raised on a regular basis. That's a lot of data entry and paperwork to deal with, and it's also taking a vast number of people to be able to do it. If they can speed up their process to generate an invoice, then if they've still got the 21 minutes available because there are enough of them and that time is allocated for each individual invoice to be generated, if it takes them 21 minutes now to generate it in the hope that it's correct because it's taken that long, what if you could automate the generation of each of those individual invoices and then use the spare time, which could in fact be 15 to 20 minutes, to analyze it, make sure it's accurate, and effectively perform a very valid review in that process before you move on to the next one. So there's an opportunity there. We're not looking to reduce the size of a workforce necessarily. We're not looking to reduce necessarily the cost or speed at which something's done, but we can improve it, we can make it more efficient, and we can certainly make it more accurate as a result of considering things like that. To give you a sense as well of what's possible when the robots are assisting us, it's around the quality of the data hitting the system, and then also the reporting that we can do with that data as well. As we move into the next component, the video that you see on screen at the moment is looking at data that's been stored in the system by the robots performing their analysis, and we have the ability to start by looking at the highest level possible. So imagine a satellite going over Europe, wanting to pinpoint information, which in this particular example is all about data that's gone into Germany. So it's drilling down from the sky to the country, from the country to the region, from the region to the individual transactions, and those transactions in that particular part of the region, we start to then look at particular suppliers, a particular supplier, and the invoice numbers that have been raised there. And coming out of that, as we select something, all of the transaction screens that you see in front of you get updated. We've got markers to look at particular line items in transaction detail. And when you're processing 6,000 invoices a month, the ability to drill down to one of those easily to get a sense of what it all looks like and what the detail is behind it becomes very, very important. Trying to wade through your accounting system to find particular pieces of information can be very time consuming, and it could also be the case that you don't need to. How about graphical output to show you what you should care about, how you should go into something? If all of your transactions should fit a particular path or curve, you look for the elements that sit above or significant below that curve to be able to click and drill down into that from the graphs that you see on screen. Everybody's requirements around this are completely different. What you're interested in seeing could be governance. It could be from a controls perspective about what's going on and what's important to you, or it could be part of your review process to give you the comfort about what's going on. Are you happy it's correct? would you be willing to put your signature next to a senior accounting officer statement to say, with the controls that we have in place, it is my assertion that everything is fit for purpose and correct, and the number as accurate as they can possibly be. Data will give you that. We're moving into a world where data is everything, and certainly, as you can see on screen, as the video repeats, that capability gives you multiple layers of information, a variety of levels of detail from the highest to the lowest. But of course, it's highly dependent on how good the quality of the data is that's being input. And that's why we look to automation solutions to aid with that, so that, again, as we mentioned before, we can up the levels of accuracy as well. Okay, Mo, back over to you.
Thanks, Adrian. Yep. So just about us and Smith and Williamson, how we can help. So ideally, we want to be able to help your clients. We're helping clients around development of automated routines to support reporting processes. We can ensure digital links and digital data transfer through automation. So this is, tying in with MTD and the new requirements around having digital links in place, the removal of key person dependencies in processes to make sure you're not wholly reliant on one person in the process or key persons, and the bottom line being freeing up personals, your team to work on value-add exercises and special projects. What are the other areas to consider? Well, how robust are your finance systems? Can they survive a digital audit? Can you put your name and signature next to a certification saying all your control measures are in place? We know tax authorities are becoming increasingly digital and requiring information in a digital format. So the burden on your teams is only increasing. So from a strategic perspective, it is paramount on organizations that organizations consider technologies like automation, data analytics to help reduce the impact of forced change. And one of the key points is what would give you comfort of your processes. So the idea is, these reports, dashboards, etc., they're going to be developed wholly around your requirements to give you that comfort of what is fit for you, what is best for your organization. And I think that's a key point that we want to stress, that it should be in your tax technology strategy or in your technology strategy as a whole, is what is best for your organization. Is it off the shelf, or is it customized solution? We can configure them, etc. So the key point here is providing you comfort. Adrian, I don't know if you want to add to anything there.
No, I think we'll pick up on a couple of pieces when we get to the Q&A session, because I can see we've had a couple of things listed there. But no, I mean, as far as there are multiple platforms out there, and we'll discuss some of those when we look at the Q&A in a moment. But the thing to consider with all of this is there is no one single solution out there in the marketplace. There is no push of a single button that will do all of this for you. There are in the world reporting solutions, there are workflow management solutions, there are robotics solutions, there are data analytics and data processing solutions as well. They're all capable of talking to each other, and one of the phrases that you will hear more and more of as technology starts to take a greater hold in the world is something called an API. And an API, an application programming interface, allows two different systems that don't necessarily come from the same supplier to be able to talk to each other. A good example for those of you that are having to file VAT returns, you've got a need to submit the 9-box VAT return these days electronically to HMRC. It used to be the case up until last year that you could type in the numbers electronically on screen and then press submit, and away you went. Nowadays, we're not allowed to do that because there is a fear, and it's why we have these digital solutions in place, that if you were typing 106,500, you could actually type in 105,600, and you would be out by over £1,000 on that particular return. So to avoid errors and potential penalties from HMRC, a digital data transfer of what you believe to be your correct VAT return boxes is required. And there are multiple solutions on the market. I think at the last count, the number of accredited suppliers of a solution that allows you to file your VAT return electronically numbered in excess of 200 that were accredited by HMRC. Now, any one of those potentially just has the ability to file the return. It's a fairly simple mechanism, but the connection between that piece of software and HMRC's website is done by a bridging tool, and these bridging tools are loosely referred to as APIs. So when you hear about APIs, it genuinely is just something saying, I can get platform A to talk to platform B electronically in the background so that your information can transfer from one place to the next. So as you look at all of these and consider what tools are available, and we'll talk about a handful of those in a moment, do hold that thought in your mind that there is no one single solution, which is unfortunate, because I would love to be the person that says, we've got the tool that, at the push of a button, you can go from generating an invoice all the way to it filing your tax return as well. There's nothing there that quite does that yet. If you look as well online at what other tax authorities are doing around the world as well, believe it or not, some of the best ones to look at are the ones that you would least expect to be leading the charge. So, for example, Mexico and Argentina have two of the most sophisticated methods by which taxes are reported and collected by the tax authorities. And it's predominantly because of levels of fraud that have taken place in the past in those countries, and the tax authorities want to stamp it out. So how better than imposing a way that the only way you can report and issue invoices is through government-approved software that would, for example, you go to the corner shop, you buy a couple of tins of something off the shelf, you pay the cashier behind the desk, the invoice that they issue to you is your tax receipt for those two tins, and it's also triggered a record mechanism up to the tax authorities as well. And it gets to the point at the end of the period where the tax authorities are in a position to tell you what your liability is, as opposed to you having to work it out and submit the return on the back of it. You obviously have the opportunity to do your own calculations and contest whatever the initial assessment is, but it's the fact that the authorities are capable of doing that. In the UK, because of course we've been around with VAT for some 40 plus years now, and other taxes dating further back than that, it's such a heavily established system, it's very sluggish to move it into the digital world, but we are starting to catch up as well. But that's all I want to add at this particular point. I'll hand back to Chloe for a moment to see what we've got on the Q&A side of things.
Thank you so much, Adrian and Mo. That was an incredibly informative session. We've had some questions come through on the live chat. The first one, Adrian, you picked up on earlier, was from Margaret with regards to the software. Does it have R&D submission capabilities for submissions to HMRC?
Some of the tools that we've worked with, and this is where we'll jump into the names of some of those products that are on the market at the moment, do have those levels of submission capabilities, yes. From an R&D perspective, because it's heavily data driven and you want to extract the information about what goes into an R&D claim, we use a platform called Alteryx, A-L-T-E-R-Y-X, Alteryx. And Alteryx is known in the market for its digital data manipulation capabilities. If any of you have ever used flowchart tools like Visio or something like that from Microsoft, where you're building all the lines and the boxes to make those decision flows to understand how a process should work, Alteryx works in a very similar way. So you would look at your existing process, build up what that process should be, and at the point the data needs to be manipulated, you're able to put calculation models behind the scenes that show us what's possible and what can be done. And on that particular point, we're then able to say, well, Alteryx can handle this for you, and the outputs that it can generate can be formatted to be submissible straight to HMRC. It's not the only one on the market. It's not ours. It just happens to be one that we use internally, but it's certainly very good. As we always have to say, there are other products available as well, but certainly for me, Alteryx is a very good one that allows us to look at the art of the possible around data manipulation and reporting.
had another question that come in saying, if you're creating automations due to an enforced change, what key questions would you ask yourself to ensure they're as robust if any change in circumstance occurs?
I think from my perspective, and I'll ask Mo to chip in on this one as well with some of the projects that he's worked in, but from my perspective, it's the ability to think of these automation processes as something where you can replace an updated chapter in a book. The example I always use, and it's whether people remember these or not, but the old green Simon's taxes binders, you used to get through the post, and probably still do, to be honest, but you used to get through the post cellophane wrapped updates to various chapters. And what would happen? You'd unclip the binder, you'd remove the old chapter, and you'd clip the new one in as the information came in. And the big benefit to doing something like that means you don't have to reissue the entire book. You only change the bits that matter. And that's the same that you can do with a lot of these processes. These digital processes and the software around it. And on the robotics side, I'll ask Mo to name some of the products as well. But on the digital side, where you can take that process flow, you can change the chapter, basically, the element that's changed. New legislation comes in, you change the component where it's relevant, rather than having to redo the entire piece from scratch. Mo, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key points here is where you've got enforced change, which may have changing goalposts by themselves as well. It's important to conduct that process review right in the start to understand what it is actually available, what are your source files, what are the source data, how do you actually need to, and where do you need to get it to do the final bit of reporting or calculation, etc. Regarding the changing goalposts, well, the software we use, like UiPath, for example, we're able to essentially get the process back onto the operating table. And if you wanted to change steps 6 and 7, or you wanted to change the resulting output from a PDF to a form filling exercise on the HMRC website, then that can be done as well. So the idea is you create the process in the first part by future proofing it. Don't hard code any sort of names and supplier details or any systems. It's best to have workable configuration files alongside your process, which can be updated as things change. So metaphorically adding in the new files into the binder when they come in.
Absolutely. And there are so many areas, aren't there, where this can be demonstrated. We're not just restricted to a simple finance process, for example. It doesn't just have to be gathering the information from two systems and putting it into a spreadsheet, for example. These automation routines can apply to so many different facets of the organization and the IT infrastructure, can't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And I just want to bring up a slide on screen. And I know I've gone through some examples already, and we've done a case study on invoicing, but generally, you're looking at the full spectrum of an organization department, from HR to IT, and especially finance and accounting, where we see the biggest uptake in terms of cost reduction and increased productivity. Generally, all finance and accounting processes involve some sort of manipulation, transferring, or reconciliation of data. These are all processes that would hugely benefit from automation. You also have like bank reconciliation, payment runs, or even payroll, for example. Generally, we find once an organization starts to automate, more and more processes come to light and become contenders for automation. Most of our clients, once they've got going with one process, they generally want to move on to process 6, 7, and 8 very quickly, because they've realized what the power of automation is.
One of the comments I like on this particular slide, and it always makes me smile when I see it, is the one under HR services, which says HR is a gold mine of opportunities for automation. Makes me smile, but it's not incorrect. If you think about the requirements these days, certainly from a GDPR perspective, of having to ensure everything is recorded correctly and accurately so that the information about particular individuals can be obtained and, if required, deleted in full, the last thing we can afford to do on the HR side of things is end up with information that's been stored slightly incorrectly and it results in broken links. And if those links are broken, when you try and remove somebody off the system in full, it might take out 85, 90% of their information. but there's a hangover somewhere else that gets missed just because of a simple typo or something like that. So where we've at least got the information coming in, if you've got automated solutions that are entering the details from a form that's been completed into the HR system, into the payroll system, you can guarantee that what's gone into one has mirrored into the other one as well. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be entered twice. Where we talk about these APIs that exist in the marketplace to allow two unrelated systems to talk to each other, a lot of those exist. A lot of software vendors create these APIs that say, if you want to connect our system to somebody else, here's the tool that allows you to create that bridge. And then you talk to the other supplier and their API talks to this one, and away they go. But we've mentioned Alteryx. Mo's mentioned as part of the robotics solutions things like a product called UiPath, the letters U and then I and then the word path at the end of it. UiPath's one of the very common robotic platform providers in the UK. Another one that I've used for many years as well is called Blue Prism. And again, you'll see and hear a lot from them in the automation and robotics space. Alteryx is one of those data manipulation tools that again can run an automated routine, but it has to be triggered. And this is where the two then start to combine to give you that all-in-one capability. You can have multiple tools available to you. You could have macro-enabled spreadsheets. You could have something like Alteryx with data manipulation and data gathering routines in place. It could be that you're using compliance software from various providers to actually produce a computation and a return, and that return within the compliance software has the capability of being submitted to the tax authorities. Already we're looking at 3 different bits of kit there, one to gather the data, one to report the data and analyze it, and also one to do the compliance work. If you put a robot around all of those, the robot can go off, it can run the reports, it can pull the data down from various systems for you. Something like Alteryx can then be told by the robot to gather that information all together, to consolidate it and turn it into one single source of the truth. And then the robot then takes that single source of the truth and posts it across to your compliance software, at which point you've got a draft return and computation available for you to then focus on. If, as is often the case, out of your compliance cycle, 60 to 70% is spent gathering the data, manipulating it, making it ready to go into a compliance tool, that element can be automated, allowing you to focus on the exception reporting, the anomalies, the oddities that have occurred in this reporting cycle, the trend analysis between this period and previous ones as well. And it gives you that comfort that everything's moving in the right direction. You know it's accurate because your robot cannot deviate from the path, but ultimately it's going to speed up your process, meaning you can focus on the stuff that you really want to do versus the stuff that is just repetitive and not as exciting as you'd like it to be, to put it simply. Mo, anything else you'd like to add before we pass back to Chloe?
No, I think you've covered quite a good amount there. Okay.
Fantastic. The only other question I've had in is, are you able to share the slides? So I have included Mo and Adrian's email addresses in the comment section. So if you do wish to get in touch with them after the session, then you can do this and request the slides through there.
Yeah, we're more than happy to provide any of this material. We've also probably got 2 or 3 slides that look at the different products and platforms that are available that we can add to this as well, that we can send out to anybody if they're interested.
Adrian and Mo, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this webinar. Do you have any final words before we sign off?
From us, thank you very much for joining us today. It's always fun to have the opportunity to talk to people about technology. Most of the time when you see us talking about these things, it's with a smile on our face because it's what we enjoy doing. And I really do believe it's the way of the future. We are moving away from heavily Excel-led products towards tools that work very well in the particular area it's designed to. There is, as I say, no one solution to do all of this, but let technology help you. It's the difference between walking to work, driving to work and getting a chauffeur-driven car to work. Sometimes it's easier to let everything move for you so that you can focus on the important things. And the important stuff is the one that keeps the business moving forward. But otherwise, no, from me, it's been great to talk to everybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Fantastic. Our next webinar in the Lockdown for Learning Business Series takes place on Thursday, the 10th of September, with Smith & Williamson discussing employee ownership trusts. If there is anything you'd like to catch up on from today's session, we'll be sending out a replay of the webinar coming at 5 p.m. today. You can find the replay and future webinars at www.freshbusinessthinking.haysummit.com or by clicking on the link in the comments. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you again, Adrian and Mo.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, folks. All the best.